Thank you, and welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Kate Tuttle, a Marketing Manager at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar on moving to the cloud, modernizing data architecture in healthcare. Today's session will cover the impact of the cloud on data architecture in healthcare. We will also dive into 2 leading healthcare organizations' cloud journeys. We are recording today, and we'll be sure to email you with information on how to access this after the session. Time permitting, we will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please type those into the chat box in the lower left corner of your screen. In a moment, I'll hand it over to our speakers, but first let me give you a quick overview on Perficient. Perficient is a leading digital transformation consulting firm serving Global 2000 and enterprise customers throughout North America. With unparalleled information technology management consulting and creative capabilities, Perficient and its Perficient Digital Agency deliver vision, execution, and value with outstanding digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions. We have a broad network of locations across the U.S. as well as offshore facilities in India and China. We deliver digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions that cultivate and captivate customers, drive efficiency and productivity, integrate business processes, improve productivity, reduce costs, and create a more agile enterprise. Founded in 1997, we're a public company with more than 3,000 employees. We form strategic partnerships with each of the major technology vendors and also have dedicated solutions and industry practices. And finally, let's give a little bit of background on our speakers. James Gaston has been working in healthcare information technology for over 25 years with experience in hospital, health insurance, vendor, and consulting services. He is an expert in healthcare analytics, providing education and industry insight through a variety of forums. Jim Koba has more than 30 years of experience in designing and delivering information technology solutions, including more than 25 years of analytics and data modeling experience, and more than 20 years in the healthcare industry working with clinical data. He has extensive healthcare industry experience covering analytics, BI, systems integration, systems operations, and data integration. Tom Lennon has more than 20 years of progressive experience implementing and supporting technology-based programs and systems. He has delivered large mission-critical projects for internal and external customers across a variety of technical domains and industry verticals, with a specialization in data warehousing, business intelligence, and analytics systems implementations. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to James.
Oh, are we going to do the survey?
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, before I jump into James. We'd like to do a quick poll question just to get an idea of where the audience is in regards to their current data environment. So if you could just take a couple seconds to answer what data environment is currently deployed at your organization. So it looks like we've got a mix of on-premise and hybrid data environments. All right. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to James now.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody, or maybe good morning to a few folks, depending on your time zone. And welcome to the Perficient webinar on cloud services. Kate introduced me, so I'm going to skip this introduction slide, but would love to have you follow on Twitter or LinkedIn if it's available for you. Trying to learn how to advance here. So HIMSS, the organization I work for, follows health IT, and our goal is to help healthcare organizations effectively use health IT for the betterment of care. There's lots of different subdivisions or organization parts of HIMSS. We've got HIMSS North America that puts on the big conference that everybody's familiar with. HIMSS Analytics, where I work, we use maturity models and collect data on the healthcare industry, a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. HIMSS Media does some publishing and smaller events that help promote and bring healthcare leaders together. With regard to HIMSS Analytics, we focus on 3 primary areas. Health IT market intelligence, like the Essentials report we're going to talk about today, health IT research and insights, and benchmarking. Benchmarking are some of the tools we use to help healthcare organizations advance their use of health IT. But in general, HIMSS Analytics bridges that gap between healthcare delivery organizations like Perficient and health IT solutions that we're going to talk about today. One of the chief material that we're going to present today is from the 2017 to our first Essentials Brief on Cloud Computing. So we've surveyed quite a few organizations around their current and future adoption of cloud and cloud services, got a vendor snapshot of the market, and talk about some of the uses that health IT or health IT organizations are using the cloud for. If you'd like to know more about this Essentials Brief, their link is there below at the bottom of the screen there, and you can go to that link and see some more details about the study. We're not going to present the whole study today, but we wanted to focus on some of the key findings of the study. So just to start us off here, one of the first questions that we asked in the study is, does your organization currently utilize the cloud or cloud services? And this was an interesting response. We got 65% said yes, 32% no, and 3% was unsure. I can certainly relate to the unsure. I was thinking about some of the apps I use on my phone today and some of the services that I use in my job. And I don't know if they're cloud-based or based on systems within our organization. So I think one of the things that points out is a lot of times whether you're cloud-based or hosted locally at your own IT facility, it's typically an IT decision, an IT thing. And sometimes you can be hosted in both, as we talked about a little bit already. So the unsure is not unexpected there. But I think what is pretty prominent here is that the yes, a full or very close to 66%, a full 2/3 saying yes, and 1/3 roughly saying no. So if you think about that, that's a big change from where we were just a few years ago. And I was trying to estimate or guesstimate, if you will, what that trend would be. And I just can't see it going back the other way, where less organizations would embrace the cloud in the future. I was at a very large healthcare organization in California recently, and having access to a strong network is a key foundational element of how they deliver services. And they have over 25 hospitals connected using one instance of their EMR and all the supporting applications. And so using the network effectively to connect their organization and drive the economies of scale that are important for them to achieve their goals as well as their budget are absolutely critical. So I see this band tightening up where the yes part of the pie continues to grow and increase, and the no part of the pie, it's going to become that much smaller. I think the unsure might even shrink a little bit too, as people begin to just presume that the solutions they're using are cloud-based or hybrid-based, because that's going to be one of the more efficient ways to deploy and ramp up capabilities in the future. So let's look at the next slide here. So those organizations that did adopt cloud services, that 65%, what were their drivers? Why were they most interested in doing this? Well, a majority of them, 34%, said that met their organization's needs for scalability. And I think an important point here is that always-on solution. So when you have your own data center, you have to maintain it. You have to staff it. It's susceptible to power outages as limited by the backup power that you're able to deploy and install in that facility. It's subject and more at risk for things like a backhoe cutting your fiber to that facility because it's one facility at one location. When I was at a big health insurance company, worked several years ago, I remember we built a backup data center, and to my surprise, they only built it about 8 miles from our current facility, which seemed like a really odd thing to do, but they had done the research and they felt like it was a good call, and that was far enough away from our current facility to provide the appropriate backup. But as it turns out, that's not that far. A lot of the utilities were the same as our existing facility, so it didn't really provide that much backup capability. It was really just an expansion of our current computer room. So it didn't provide the scalability, the growth that the organization needed, nor did it buy the redundancy and backup disaster recovery, which is the second primary reason that folks are engaging in cloud and cloud-based hybrid solutions. And certainly that's a big opportunity. When we think about the cost of maintaining your own facility, maintaining the equipment in that facility, maintaining that equipment over time, and the cost to upgrade, patch, and keep up to speed and secure all that equipment, that's quite an expense. So I think that leads us to the third reason that a lot of organizations are looking at cloud-based solutions, lowering their current IT and maintenance costs. So what if you didn't have to have secondary or backup equipment sitting around that you knew you were going to have to replace or upgrade in 3 to 5 years, or that you weren't going to have to keep tabs on and apply patches to, and have someone there who was knowledgeable enough and skilled enough to apply those patches and updates? Well, that's where I think some of the cost and opportunities with cloud-based computing come in. You can offload that workload and that expertise to an organization that's doing it for a very large swath of industries as well as healthcare, and has expertise in those industries that's a lot deeper than you could hire locally. And I think that plays into the fifth reason that organizations are looking at the cloud: lack of internal IT staff or expertise for their on-site work. Got a lot of buddies in healthcare security, and it's really tough to find people that have that expertise, that are able to stay on that leading edge of health IT security. And it's certainly a very competitive and in-demand market for those folks. So the challenges of hiring those folks and keeping them happy in a smaller organization are significant and real, and the ability to turn to a larger organization and have them face those challenges and worry about that staffing and bring that expertise to bear is a positive for using the cloud. Other reasons organizations are moving: enhancing their information or data security, and then various other reasons. But let's look at why some organizations maybe aren't moving to the cloud. So not currently in their budget was one of the biggest reasons, a full third. Another 29% privacy and security concerns. And I think those kind of go hand in glove. I talked a minute ago about the example of organization I work for building a big data center. Once you've installed or invested in that footprint of that building and all the facilities and staffing, sometimes it can take a while to step out of that or step away from it. So seeing the cost benefit and the breakdown of how you can shift and do it economically may take some time to play out. Privacy and security concerns are certainly a real thing. We're all dealing with a lot of flux and concerns around security. It seems like we're really in a cyber war, whether we believe it or acknowledge it or not. There's tons of bad actors out there right now, and they're all trying to hack every one of the hospital systems that you all are engaged with on a regular basis. So certainly opening another avenue to risk and vulnerability in the cloud is something that has to be taken seriously, and you have to work with a vendor that appreciates the risk that healthcare brings to the table and understands how to deal with those risks. And then balancing, of course, and weighing those benefits and risk is the third reason why a lot of organizations are struggling with the cloud. And then finally, I think the last reason that we saw pop up of why folks aren't moving to the cloud was IT operations are solely internal to their organization. And I've run across a few of those folks that that still have all of their IT internally in-house and all of their data in-house, but I think they're becoming much less common and a little more rare than they certainly used to be. You have to continue to look at the market and see where it's going and see where these opportunities are that are presented by the network and cloud-based services because they're certainly growing, and the performance and capabilities of them are really starting to shake the market up. So with that, I wanted to point out we've got a couple of maturity models that HIMSS Analytics offers and we use with health IT providers. So we've got the EMR adoption model and the adoption model for analytics maturity. Both focus in on analytics and data management, data governance, and using data effectively. So if you're interested in using those maturity models to get a benchmark of how your organization is using health IT and health IT services like cloud computing, we'd be happy to talk to you. So I think Kate's got another online survey for us here to move the presentation forward. Kate?
Sure. Thanks, James. So James covered some of the drivers that we're seeing and they're seeing in the HIMSS Analytics space. Just wanted to see which of the following drivers for cloud adoption is most attractive to your particular organization. Scalability and availability, reduced in-house IT workload, reduced data privacy security risk, disaster recovery needs, or decreased costs. So as we're kind of seeing some results roll in, it looks like scalability and availability and then decreased costs seem to be what most people are focused on. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim Koba, and he's going to walk us through the first cloud journey from one of our clients.
Thank you, Kate. And thanks, James, for the setup here. I appreciate you all being able to take time out for the webinar today. I am going to walk you through a journey from a large health system that I work with as part of Proficient in bringing up a clinical analytics solution and kind of go over their journey, which definitely involved the cloud, but also points out some typical things that occur with an analytics type platform that may not directly correspond to those folks trying to look at the cloud for more of an operational EHR type of a system. So in working through this is a very large organization that we work through. They are an integrated delivery organization serving a fairly large but contiguous geographic location with over 15 hospitals and many clinics and ancillary sites around and through that geographic region. They're known for excellence and their leadership position, both in clinical delivery and in terms of their clinical research partnerships. The organization had recently went through a strategic roadmap around their clinical analytics architecture, and this was prior a lead-in that eventually spawned the particular project and initiative I'm about to talk about. And that identified a number of key goals, and you'll see some of these resonate right back to some of the key drivers for cloud adoption on folks. This was not this organization's first foray into clinical analytics. They've done many things in the past. They are quite experienced in some analytics and reporting. They had done work in the cloud, but not in this particular space, and it was very isolated what they had done. But overall, their drivers were really to consolidate and rationalize multiple clinical repositories, a typical driver in an analytics data warehousing kind of environment or effort. It's the next three bullets under those goals that really drove the decision and the evaluation of a cloud version of this technology, which is some of the themes that we've already covered today. Extensibility, an integrated technology platform. A couple things I'll cover in a minute are the standardized enterprise class availability of hardware and software in that platform, using contemporary technology. And a major driver for them was to reduce infrastructure costs, or basically to reduce any new investment in infrastructure. They have prior investments in that infrastructure, and they were not looking to increase that capital outlay. And then more generically, they did want to retire existing technology. That comes not only with different software solutions that were already in play, but the technology platforms themselves that they reside on. Some of the key challenges here. Now, the first one is more of an organizational challenge and is what I would say fairly common in a warehousing kind of a situation. This particular client has a fractionated environment. They are decentralized in terms of their governance. And those kind of work together where they have used those past efforts into analytics. They've created viable solutions, but those solutions were not necessarily enterprise-wide in scope, were not necessarily well coordinated across each other, and that led to some gaps of data, needed data that wasn't available, and it leads to inconsistencies, multiple versions of the truth, if you've heard that phrase before. A couple of other things that were going on in this organization is that prior to this decision around clinical analytics, about 2 years prior, they made a decision to consolidate their EHR technology into a single vendor and a single platform across the entire scope of their facilities. That rollout was well in flight by the time we engaged, but it wasn't complete, which meant that their subject matter experts, the people who were most familiar with the data and the workflows that populate that data in the new EHR, were being highly sought after to continue to support the rollout, which made access and availability to that information more challenging for the analytics team. And lastly, the last two bullets really kind of more speak to where we were going with the cloud. With standing up a new team dedicated to supporting clinical analytics, there was a steep learning curve. And with the new technology, this client was looking for ways to offset the amount of training and ramp up that they would have to do, knowing there's still work that they have to do to be able to care, maintain, and grow the system or the solution once developed, but trying to offset the amount of basically infrastructure support kind of knowledge and a new technology. They wanted to be able to outsource that through the cloud vendor and take advantage of that infrastructure as a service kind of methodology. Lastly, of course, security and privacy was a paramount concern. This clinical analytics, even though it's supporting research, is also supporting clinical care decision making, and as such, it is a PHI-oriented endeavor and is subject to all of the HIPAA privacy and security regulations and things. That was a particular driver from this client's point of view in looking at a cloud architecture or cloud vendor, taking advantage of what people are doing in that space to protect data. Again, I think James pointed out the fact that cloud vendors working across multiple industries are gaining experience from a variety of ways, protecting against a variety of threats. And by buying into the cloud, you're buying into that level of expertise in addition to getting the specific kind of a solution that they were desiring. So the solution itself, we worked with them to stand up an enterprise data warehouse, EDW. That warehouse is positioned in the cloud. Major drivers for this were cost savings and the architectural flexibility. So wanting to be able to keep it scalable, be able to be flexible in what it needs to do, have the architecture readily adapt, the technology ready to adapt to changes and advances in underlying server technology as available. Those are some of the major drivers. Specifically, going to the cloud in an analytics solution required looking at some specific design patterns that work well in a cloud environment. In a tried and true mechanism for data warehousing in an on-premise environment, traditional extract, transform, and load tools work very well where servers and different technologies are co-located in the same data centers. You have very large and very short pipes to be able to connect these different tools. One of the distinct differences in the cloud is you get, using the analogy, you get a longer and thinner pipe. So you have to use that pipe effectively and not transfer more data back and forth across the boundaries of the cloud environment to the host environment any more than necessary. And that's where our particular company came into play. We brought together experience in an industry data model. We had an established relationship with a cloud provider who could stand up the database technology and provide for it as an infrastructure as a service, meaning that you get care and feeding of that environment, backups, restores, the hardware maintenance, and middleware maintenance and upgrades that go with that. In addition, to be able to handle that pipe situation and to be able to handle expediting the data movement throughout the platform, Perficient brought to bear its Cloud Analytics Gateway. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But we also utilized a high-speed data migration service. So one of the ways we counteracted the need to be efficient in our use of data transfer across the pipe from a localized environment to the cloud environment was to be able to use this high-speed data transfer service, minimizing any kind of data transformation that would occur a part of that step, and localizing all or specializing all data transformation to occur on the database in the cloud environment, where we can take advantage of the database's power and the server technology itself to expedite that data movement and transformation. That's turned out to be very effective, and it also lends itself to be able to be used in a hybrid environment, because the mechanisms by which we do data movement and transformation are actually more extensible and transition to alternate technologies easier than more traditional approaches or more ETL, extract, transform, and load approaches. Additionally, one other component is there are a number of other tools the client already had familiarity with, and they wanted to maintain those as part of the solution. So, for example, an ETL tool is still being used, but it's being used more for the familiarity of being able to do job control. And that ETL tool is installed locally, but it's not transferring data across that pipe. It is basically executing job commands so that the data transformation occurs on the other side without data movement back and forth across the pipe. A little bit about our Health Analytics Gateway, the on-cloud version. Largely what we've implemented here and what our gateway supports is what's called a data vault type implementation of a data warehouse. And that, trying to be brief, is a delineation of multiple layers in the warehouse. The initial layer is optimized for data loading and integration of data from disparate sources. So being able to align and conform that data to a common taxonomy, a common syntax, and being able to load that data fast. And then has a secondary layer that's really optimized around reporting and analytics. Given these two layers are relatively static and don't change, we're able to provide a product that actually pre-codes, has pre-built executable code that supports the data movement across those layers that are well established. Has the added advantage of then being able to focus the client-specific business rules, what's unique to each individual source, to be something very isolated in the upfront transformation process, which in the cloud environment it occurs right after that initial data drop. So the non-transfer data drops into the cloud environment. We do the heavy-duty transformation right up front, get data conformed, and then from that point on, you have standardized processing. This gives you the kind of data typically needed in a clinical analytics environment. It also helps reduce the overall maintenance footprint and allows you to isolate where you do data transformation, thus keeping the bulk of your code base intact even as you onboard new sources or deal with modifications that occur in your source system through alternate workflows or establishing new types of workflows in your clinical environment. I hit on a few of these already, but to just kind of summarize up what the key benefits are, we did establish this enterprise data warehouse integrating historical sets of data that came from a variety of different systems, as well as establishing an operational feed for new data on a continual daily basis. That was able to really provide almost a one-stop shop for clinical research, or at least an initial stop for clinical research, where cohort identification and selection can happen against one resource without having to undo a lot of effort. And then secondarily, also supports the clinical analytics that were already in flight and allows those analytics to start to migrate to using the new technology over time. This has actually enabled the client to be able to achieve some savings with benefits of reducing the technology stack in-house and lessening their ongoing investment in that technology stack. And I mentioned before the architecture, the nature of the gateway combined with this analytics has really improved the ability of this client to onboard new systems very effectively, and as well, in that ongoing growth and maturation of their environment and their skill set, it's kind of reduced and focused the technology needed to support the environment. That's what I have for this. I will turn it back over to, I believe, Kate, or is it you, Tom, that's going to take over from here?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Did you want to hit on any of these lessons learned? And then we'll turn it over to Tom.
Sure. I probably got ahead of myself. Sorry about that. But I think one thing that's general that we learned in that disparate environment, it's not really specific to cloud, but something to be aware of when you had that kind of very large, complex organization with multiple priorities that the organization is dealing with. Establishing an enterprise-wide steering committee up front helped in a number of ways. One is it helped get very clear requirements defined up front, but it also provided a standard mechanism for communication and buy-in throughout the build process, so that by the time you hit go live, the client and the constituents that are to be consuming this data are aware of what they can get access to, what's available, and it really sped the adoption process. The other one that I probably didn't touch on very, very early is that the client, along with us, really wanted to limit the number of vendors that were involved in the project effort, and that was to improve communication, to make sure that we had a very coordinated environment. So we had a single vendor for the cloud environment, a single implementation vendor, and then the client. The three of us worked in very close partnership to examine the architecture up front, to look at the unknowns, while many of the tools and technologies in use were proven in and of themselves. The combination of them was unique to this particular solution, and as such we knew we would encounter unexpected events. So by working together ahead of the time, while we couldn't answer all the unknown questions, we could basically put together a plan, an architecture, and a plan to proceed that minimized the impact of those events, but also gave us some time and some mechanisms to be able to deal with those events as they occurred. And I've already touched on, I think, the resource and training, so I won't repeat myself there. Okay, Kate.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Next, we're going to move over to Tom Lennon, and he's going to go through our second client cloud journey, an academic health center.
Hi, everyone. This is Tom Lennon. For those of you who missed the beginning, I lead Perficient's healthcare-focused data warehousing and analytics practice. I'm going to talk a little today about a project we did and the solution we offered with one of our customers in the academic health center space. So this customer is one of the leading academic health systems in the country, located in the western U.S. They have two top-ranked teaching hospitals. One is Children's Hospital, another Adult Care Center. They also have multiple clinics and ambulatory facilities. And they have a very strong research center. I think one of the leading in the country. And So their charter is really to provide the best possible care to patients in their community, as well as to educate future clinicians and provide leadership in research to improve patient care. Moving on. So this project was all about, the organization kind of looked out and saw that they had to develop a focus in research around personalized medicine, translational medicine, and really figure out how to best provide care to the population as opposed to individuals. And as they kind of built a program around that, which was an adjunct to their research center, really was to that they needed to build a data analytics platform that would share information across their different clinics, their hospitals, where they were providing care, to get that information into one place, get the right information, and bring that in a way that they can make sense of it in order to use that to gain insights. So as they looked out, they started by saying, hey, let's form some guiding principles of what we want this program to be all about and how we want this program to work. A few of the things that they came up with was that they wanted to foster innovation, enable agility, favor intuitive visualizations, and they wanted to learn fast. So learn fast from their successes and at times the failures, but use this to grow a platform that's going to play and be valuable to them for years to come. So, and some of the key challenges they faced as they thought through this is, they realized this wasn't going to be easy. They needed to get buy-in from multiple organizations. Those organizations, the different hospitals and the research center, they had different governance models. They had different funding models. So it wasn't all centrally governed and funded. So that has some complexities involved in that. Figuring out who pays for what, who does what work, how that impacts the different priorities that each organization might have that could be competing internally for these things, as well as which tools and standards will be used. Obviously, there's security concerns around providing data to other organizations. Traditionally, these organizations did a bit more, they're data consumers. They would use their data internally. Now they're being asked to provide data externally, at least from the hospitals and the clinics, to provide data externally as a data provider. Obviously, security concerns come with that. Being ready to really act upon that takes some change that they all had to kind of become one with. And of course, there's just lots and lots of data that they're working with and they had to provide. So the system and program they built had to be ready to scale. And they wanted to build it in a way where they don't have to overbuy it first. They don't have to overplan it first. They can field something that that balances what they need today with making sure they have enough headroom to grow into it over time. So these are all some of the challenges that they're aware of, and they know they had to take into account as they move through the program. So what do? All right. So the solution they came up with, they started by defining a strategy and a roadmap, defining an architecture and selecting the tools. And where they went with that was to initially was to develop an architecture and a plan based around an on-premises structured warehouse using an Oracle stack for data warehouses, data integration, and BI. And pretty common fare, done time and time again by organizations. They felt good about it, asked us to come in and help them with the implementation. And as we went through that process, especially because of some of the complexities and challenges I talked about a moment ago, we realized that 6 months in, spent time defining requirements and doing some data profiling and whatnot, but it took an awful long time to stand up the hardware and the application infrastructure. So 6 months in, we're looking at there's not even any data loaded into the system yet, which is quite a while, big investment, a lot of costs went into that. But one of the things that it really kind of showed them was, they know that this program and this implementation solution is going to be one that's going to change over time. Some of the needs are going to change over time, right? And so as they change, is this kind of the pace and velocity things are going to go at forever? And is that going to stifle their innovation and their agility? Obviously, they're already sunk into a lot of costs, but how much more cost are they going to incur before they get to a point of value? So these things are, swirling around and figuring out, is this the right solution for them? Obviously, a difficult thing to consider going a different direction at that point, right, with that big investment and so much energy brought into it. But at that time, what they took a step back and thought it through was that, we need to make a change here. This isn't going to really satisfy our guiding principles. This isn't going to satisfy what we're setting out to do. So they decided to pivot to the cloud. We worked with them, and they went to a fully managed warehouse solution. It was Google using Google BigQuery, which allowed them to leverage, not only a common infrastructure that no individual organizational entity had to support, but it was common. It freed up a lot of cycles from their IT staff, who now didn't have to support the infrastructure and some of the other things. But it also was using, mainly based on SQL from a data integration perspective. Therefore, they didn't have to retool because their data wranglers and data developers knew SQL already. They had to learn some things, but it wasn't really a shift from that perspective. They also decided to leverage the analytics tools, the front-end tools that their business users and their business analysts already used, and they already knew, so that they could move quicker and they wouldn't have to quite spend as much time and energy learning the new tools, along with figuring out, all the other difficult questions and things they need to work through to get this into play. And so that pivot to the cloud took some doing, but overall, it worked out pretty well from them. If we think about what the eventual solution was for that, and some of the key benefits they got was within the first 6 months, they were able to integrate data from the main hospitals, which was a first for that organization. Okay, they were able to within 4 weeks after that, they were able to field visually oriented dashboards, which included having to spend time, normalizing some of the data. Okay, and they were able to get their current users and analysts to jump right in because they knew the tools, and they could start driving things forward. In addition, it significantly reduced the operating costs and freed up the IT teams that I mentioned before. Okay, so with that, let me just show you here a little bit an example of some of the dashboards and what they were able to accomplish firsthand. So this is one of the dashboards that provided influenza surveillance. So what this shows is flu trends. So where the people are getting the flu, geographically where they're located, how severe the cases based on location, based on age, and compare that to past years as well. So which obviously is going to help them understand how do we proactively do the things we need to do to better serve our population that are probably going to be coming in with the flu, are already coming in, but will be coming in soon as well if we compare year over year. Another thing we put together with them was a diagnosis prevalence dashboard. So also for influenza, what are people presenting with? What are the symptoms and diagnoses they're presenting with at the different hospitals and clinics? And how is that broken down by gender, ethnicity, and age range, so that they can understand, who within the population of their patients are they dealing with, and what are they seeing the most to be prepared when they do come in. And then separately, another more of the same, really, this dashboard shows the facility and payer type. So it breaks down a lot of the same information, but now it shows which facility have they come into, and what are they presenting with, as well as what type of insurance are they coming in under. Do they have Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, et cetera? And so that's, this helped them really understand, their population, understand what they were seeing given a specific disease, and help them understand what they can expect. And so this is really the type of thing they're looking for to gain an understanding of. This was something, again, after challenging and struggling for the first 6 months, going to the cloud. 6 months later, 6 months and 4 weeks later, they're actually able to get to value, which is kind of showed them something that kind of helped them to understand that this is the right way for them to go. So if we move on, all right. So for the lessons learned, for this combined organization, the on-premise solution just took too long, stifled innovation and agility. Moving to the cloud reduced their overall near-term investment. It helped ease their organizational tension and workload, simplified getting to points of value, using the familiar tools again. It also ensured scalability and allowed them to buy, the right size solution today, since it's subscription-based. And as they scaled and grew, they were able to scale that without having to prepay up front or be in a position where they're worried that they didn't size their architecture and their infrastructure to what their eventual needs are. And then it also helped reduce their internal security risk, shifting some of that accountability and risk to the vendor. Obviously, they still held the main accountability and responsibility for keeping the information about their patients and whatnot safe. But this actually allowed them to leverage people who their core business is security is part of that, where the core business of most health systems, that's an awfully important thing. But our IT experts in our different health systems have a lot of things that they have to be experts on. They have their attention is on many different things all at once. So having the focused organization that is going to secure this really does help you, and really does help you provide that security and add confidence to that. So, and I think hope that's helpful. I think that shows what we did with that organization and how the cloud benefited them, given their particular needs and risks and challenges. So I'll hand it back over to Kate now for some polls.
Thanks, Tom. Yep. So we've got a couple more poll questions before we jump into Q&A. Remember, the bottom left of your screen is a chat box. You can enter any questions you have in there. First poll question: if you're planning to implement a cloud solution, how far along is the project? You're developing a strategy, you're evaluating platforms, implementing the cloud environment, migrating data and applications, it's completed, or you don't have any plans as of yet. So it looks like several folks don't have plans. We've got several that are in the kind of the strategy development phase. Okay, very good. And then the last poll question: which cloud environments are you evaluating for your data hosting needs? Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, IBM Cloud, or Microsoft? And all right, looks like there's a good mix of those as well. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and open up for Q&A. As I mentioned, please type in any questions you have in the lower left-hand chat box there. We do have some that have come in, so we'll get started on those. This question I think is for Jim. When you were talking through the cloud journey for the health system, a question came in on how much volume of data was handled as part of the migration.
Sure. So one note to note is that some of the legacy systems had history going back about 20 years. So I'll give you some different counts. For example, overall, I think there were about 8 million, just under 8 million patients. That accounts to an area of around about 50 million encounter visit type things, just under 50 million medication entries. But you get to the very large thing, well over a few billion alert transactions. We're talking about 100,000 or 100 million lab kind of rows or lab transactions, and an equal amount of radiology type transactions. So it's a fairly large footprint of data that comes over. I don't have the specifics on our daily volume right in front of me here, but if that's something you'd like me to follow up on, I can certainly do that.
Great, thanks, Jim. Question, maybe Tom, will start with you on this one. What are the benefits that you see to a hybrid approach as opposed to just an on-prem or cloud-only environment?
Yeah, I guess it depends a lot on what the customer, the client needs are, right? What are you trying to accomplish, and what do you have? So some of the benefits there are, you have your source systems oftentimes are local, okay? So by using a hybrid approach, there are things that you need to access locally. It's really a matter of the right tool for the right job, right? And with that, there are some things that your in-house staff is going to know much better than anyone else could, right? And part of that also comes back to security. And if you want to secure data, there might be certain parts of certain data components and certain ways you need to secure data, which, depending on your cloud vendor, they may not be really accomplished at. That's one possibility. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Another question, what kind of tool was used for data transformation? Is it something that's custom built or a tool from a product-based company?
I can field that. This is Jim. So in the cloud analytics journey that I spoke about, the main tool for data transformation came through our Perficient Gateway product. It is something Perficient has created, but that tool, the cloud version of that tool, provides a proprietary framework, but the actual code, the executable, is ANSI standard SQL. SQL generation that gets created, and it's SQL that does the data transformation and data movement in the cloud, which makes all of the executable database inherent. So, hopefully that answered the question there.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Another question, from the federal and state regulatory and compliance perspective, how are cloud implementations addressed?
A pretty big question, so it's a good one. It's a pretty big question. I think we'd probably need a little more time to really delve into that. Depending on what the concern is, most of the cloud vendors that we work with do provide a BAA where they take on a lot of that. They take on a lot of the responsibility, accountability, if it's from a security perspective. Not all, but there are different ways to handle those. It would depend on which of the compliance specifics we're looking at there. I don't know, Jim, if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I agree. It's a good question, but very broad. Typically what you'll find in most cloud vendors with their security, privacy, regulation compliance, they will offer a menu of capabilities that they have. Depending on what type of cloud mechanism you go with, whether you're going with a software as a service or you're going with infrastructure as a service or you're basically just contracting for a hosted environment, that will drastically affect the capabilities available to you, and it will also impact the responsibility you might have to stand up things within that capability set. So capability may be there, but you have to incorporate it as part of your solution design. That would be more true in an infrastructure as a service type mechanism as opposed to a software as a service where you're basically going to be given some instantiated capability that meets a set of requirements. The state aspect of this is really interesting as each state has its own set of regulatory requirements that you'll need to understand, and if you do operate in multiple states, that's something you're going to have to get a handle on in addition to what you have to do from a federal point of view.
Great, thank you both. Let's see, another question here. You mentioned Perficient's Cloud Analytics Gateway. What if my organization isn't ready to move to the cloud, but we need help with data migration? Is there a tool that Perficient offers that can help with that?
Absolutely. In fact, the cloud version of our gateway is an offshoot. It was a retooling of a pre-existing product, a health analytics gateway for an on-prem solution that Perficient had available. So we're certainly positioned to be able to assist in a cloud or a hybrid or an on-prem type environment with that type of tool.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's going to conclude our presentation today. Thanks everyone for joining, and I would encourage you to follow Perficient team online as we have new information added daily. If you visit Perficient.com and click on the Insights tab, you can find our blogs, white papers, and upcoming webinars. Again, thanks so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.